And he talks about in the morning prioritizing mindfulness, movement, and mindset.
Yes.
And I heard his podcast on this. I thought, I'm going to try this. And part of the mindfulness, you just accomplish that by doing some breath work. And it sets your mind in a calm position to begin the work of the day.
Hi, I'm Rachel, owner of the Natural Birth Site, certified birth doula, childbirth educator, and midwife's assistant.
And I'm Tiffany Muniz, certified birth doula, lactation counselor, and midwife assistant.
Here, you'll learn all about different aspects of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
Remember, none of this information should take the place of your care provider and is not medical advice.
Birth is not a medical emergency.
Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Natural Birth Talk. I'm your host, Rachel. Tiffany is off in a birth helping one of her sweet mamas, so she won't be here today. It's just going to be me and Mr. Andrew Pudewa from the Institute for Excellence in Writing. And usually he does these chats with homeschoolers, but he has this one chat where he's talking about how to start your day off right as a mom. And it could apply to homeschool moms, pregnant moms, postpartum moms. So he's going to be here talking about that with us today. But before we really get into that topic, I want to let him introduce himself.
Sure. Yeah. Andrew Pudewa, and I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I met Rachel at a homeschool convention. I believe it was in St. Louis. Is that right?
Yep.
And I usually am teaching things about how to help kids learn to listen, speak, read, write, and think better. That's kind of my job. But I have, in the past few years, begun exploring and really becoming very excited about health and wellness and nutrition and exercise and longevity. And so that's kind of my little side passion right now. I do have 7 children, all of whom were born at home. And I have 15 plus 1 on the way. She's due in December, number 16. Grandchildren, all of whom except one who is emergency C-section, also born at home. So we are continuing the tradition of natural birthing methods and using a comforting and holistic approach. And so I've had my share of being around children and midwives and moms in the throes of labor. And it's one of those miracles of life. I never tire of contemplating the amazingness of human beings coming into existence.
It's amazing, right? That's why I'm a birth doula. That's why I do what I do. And audience, I did not know that he had home births when I invited him on the podcast. And so that was just a beautiful coincidence that worked out as we started chatting with each other. And as most of you know, but Mr. Pudewa does not know, I also had a home birth with my third and natural births with the other. So the other 2 biological children. So really super cool. Not the point of the topic today, but just really fun side notes. The point of today's chat, though, is this wonderful chat that you gave at the homeschool convention about how parents, and for our audience, moms specifically, can start their day off better, and little tips and different things we can do to help the whole day go more smoothly.
Yeah. So the talk you heard, I kind of went out on an edge here, and I wanted to try to trick people into coming.
It worked.
I knew if I said something like how to be more healthy and happier, it wouldn't have got everybody. So I titled it Power Tips for Improving Teaching and Learning at Home. And no one reads descriptions. So, it's the title they decide on. But when I got everyone in the room. I said, none of you know what I'm going to talk about here. But this is what it's going to be. So I addressed 5 areas: light and sleep, air and breath, movement, food and fasting, and environment. I started with light and sleep actually because I had interviewed on my podcast Katie Wells. Her podcast is Wellness Mama, and she's really big in her world. She's got dozens of thousands of followers, and she's been around. In fact, my daughter, who now has 4 children, and I guess she would be 28, she was reading Wellness Mama's blog when she was 14.
Oh, wow.
That's how long she's been around. Anyway, I had Katie Wells on my podcast, and I said, okay, Katie, so for my listeners, which are mostly homeschool moms, what would you say is the single most important thing that you know that would help them and help their kids just have a better life, learn better, live better, be happier? What's the most important thing? And it surprised me. I thought she might talk about, I don't know, prioritizing protein in the morning, but no, it was light.
Yeah.
And so she said, and I'd heard this there's Andrew Huberman and the Huberman Lab podcast. He talks about this. A lot of research now on how light in the morning is so very, very important in so many different ways.
Yeah.
One thing we know for a fact is that early morning light stimulates the release of the hormone cortisol, which is related to attentiveness and engagement and energy.
Okay.
And I kind of myself, I always had the habit of getting up in the morning, and I liked the dark. I liked the kind of quiet, dark feeling. And I would,
sit at the table with a cup of coffee in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. And once I started learning this about light, I intentionally started to turn on the brightest lights in the house. And then as soon as the sun peeps over the horizon, I'm outdoors trying to get that light into my eyes and on my skin, and get that early morning cortisol release. Because what we want is cortisol to kind of spike in the morning and then gradually decline over the course of the day, so that we have a cortisol at the lowest level when we want to go back to sleep in the evening. But when that doesn't happen, then stressful things will cause a release of cortisol. And so what happens to a lot of people is they don't get it in the morning. So then, they start their day and then something happens that's stressful, and that spikes the cortisol, and then it'll come down and it'll spike again. And you'll get these cortisol spikes, which are not healthy and don't promote good end of the day relaxing.
Yeah.
The other thing that's so interesting is the relationship between cortisol and melatonin. So when you get early light in the morning, it sets, if you will, a clock in your system. We have this part of our nervous system, I believe it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's somewhere between the visual function and the brain function and the endocrine system, but it sets a timer for the release of melatonin. So what you want is cortisol up and then gradually decline, and then what you want is the melatonin timer starts and then gradually increasing, and then at night, as the sun goes down, the lights go down, the melatonin increases, getting you ready to sleep, so you have overall better quality of sleep. And of course that helps us as parents, and it really helps our kids.
Hey listener, do you want a comprehensive yet concise and inexpensive online at your own pace natural birth education course to help you prepare for natural birth, pregnancy, and postpartum? Then check out the description below for that and our helpful products guide. Now back to the show.
Absolutely. And I love all the hormone talk, because those are hormones we talk about with birth anyway. But it's just really cool to, be able to step outside of birth and be like, okay, well, these hormones are actually really helpful and work in other ways too. And you explained that super well. So guys, something as simple as literally sticking your head out the door in the sunlight for just a few minutes in the morning is really going to help you to wake up. It's going to help all of your hormones to function properly. And it's therefore going to help you sleep better at night as well, which, like you said, we all need. So
yeah, the other thing that it's actually a hormone, though most people don't think of it in that category, is vitamin D.
mm-hmm.
Right? We assume that vitamin D is like vitamin C, and we get it from eating some food.
Mm-hmm.
But what we get from food are actually the precursors, and the vitamin D is synthesized as a hormone. And that, of course, is so essential for immune system function, mitochondrial health, and good energy. In men, testosterone balance. So that's another benefit of sunlight in particular. And it seems like early morning sunlight has the advantage of kind of boosting the vitamin D production for the day, which is something that we want. And then, when winter hits, we have to kind of make up for the fact that, the sun isn't up and it's not that bright. And in some places it's too cold to want to much be outside for very long.
Yep.
And so then we could talk about the idea of red light and the advantages of a red light lamp, which I have recently acquired, and that helps as well. But these two aspects of light and sleep in the morning, the melatonin cortisol cycle, and then the sunlight on the skin. And then the last thing, and I just learned this, Rachel, I'm sure you've heard blue light at night is bad. So
it interferes with sleeping and things like that.
Yeah, get off your screens an hour before you want to go to sleep. Don't let the kids be looking at screens when it's bed. And so I'm like, okay, I'll believe that. But why? Anyway, what even is blue light? I didn't even know. So I recently learned that blue light on the spectrum, you have, your infrared and your near infrared and your red, and you go through the whole spectrum. Blue light is right in the middle. So the sun emits the highest amount of blue light in the middle of the day when it is closest to you, because it's not being filtered through as much atmosphere. So at sunrise and sunset, we get a lot more red light because the blue light is being filtered and the red light penetrates through the atmosphere. But in the middle of the day, when the sun is overhead, there's less atmosphere, and so it's more direct. And that's when we get the most blue light from the sun, which stimulates alertness and attentiveness and all of that. And so then at the end of the day, the sun is back down in the more red light zone at sunset. And yet, if we go look at screens that emit that blue light, it tricks our brains into thinking, nope, not time to calm down, not time to sleep, got to be alert, got to be awake, got to be aware. And so our body and brain starts to think it's the middle of the day, which is not good if what you're trying to do is calm your kids down and get them to sleep because it's 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Right. Yeah, that is a really good tip because, like you said, I knew the blue light was bad, but I didn't know why. So that is super interesting.
Yeah, I would refer people to, if you want to learn about this in great depth, Andrew Huberman is a professor of ophthalmology and neurology at Stanford University. And he has a podcast called the Huberman Lab. And he does a lot on light because it's connected so much, with his field of ophthalmology and how the eyes and the brain and the hormones are all connected. And it's a phenomenal podcast. So to get more in depth on that, I would refer you to Andrew Huberman's research.
Yeah, I will link his podcast in the description below, and I'll also link Katie Wells in the description below, since you mentioned her too. Okay, so we talked about light. What was next? Was it air and breath?
Yeah, we're talking about air and breath. So, one thing that a lot of people may notice but not be really aware of the importance is nasal breathing. And this was at one point very, very well known. In fact, it was very common for parents to tell their children, keep your mouth shut. Now, there could be lots of reasons to tell your children, keep your mouth shut, but this specifically had to do with the importance of habitually breathing through your nose. unless you're talking or exercising or doing something where you need a very quick intake. But nasal breathing is so important for the production of nitric oxide. And the nitric oxide molecule is the one that actually allows for the efficient transport of oxygen to all the cells of the body. It's essential to get the oxygen to your organs, to your brain, to all parts of your body. It's a vasodilator. So I started, as soon as I learned this, I started paying attention to, am I breathing through my nose most of the time? And then I bumped into this guy, James Nestor, who wrote a book called Breath. And this was just fascinating to me because evidently, from ancient yogis through, all time, but now modern science is verifying the fact that you can affect your physiology by conscious breathing. In fact, Huberman points out that breathing is one of the most unique things that human beings do because it's both part of the autonomous nervous system, meaning we do it without thinking, and we can do it with thinking. So it's actually a bridge between our conscious and unconscious body functions.
That's interesting. That is a really interesting way to think about it, because obviously we're all just going to breathe, but are we being conscious of how we're breathing?
Yeah. So I started experimenting with more conscious breathing. And the first thing I discovered is that it is very calming.
Yeah.
If you intentionally breathe out more slowly than you breathe in, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that essentially connects your brain to the rest of the organs in your body. Very important part of your nervous system. It acts as a vasodilator, getting more oxygen and carbon dioxide into the tissues of your body. And it also has this calming effect because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
So if you're in the gym, you're working hard, you're going to breathe in and you're going to push air out real fast. That's to activate the sympathetic nervous system to concentrate energy to create force. But when you breathe in and then breathe out more slowly, you get the opposite effect. So one really simple variation that anyone can try on this would be to start with what is often called box breathing.
Yeah, that one's my favorite. I've been doing that every morning.
So you even your breath. So you breathe in, say for 4 counts, breathe in, and then you hold for 4 counts, and then you breathe out for 4 counts, and then you hold out for 4 counts. So it's a 4, 4, 4, 4. And just doing that, all of a sudden, your mind just starts to be clear of the busyness of the constant chatter that can go on.
Yes. Even like, your internal chatter too.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like meditation with no meditation. It's like, okay, now you're paying attention to something, and in doing that, you're silencing many other things.
Yes, I just took a basic life support and neonatal resuscitation protocol class, and one of their tips was that, which I already knew this tip because I had listened to your chat, but one of their tips was, okay, if you are needing to perform something to save a life, it can be really chaotic in your mind, and box breathing was their tip for calming yourself down in the moment to be able to make those choices. And so, I mean, if it can apply and work in a life-saving situation like that, it absolutely can apply at home in the morning when you're getting started, or when you're feeling frustrated, or in birth when, things are starting to get really intense. So great tip.
A lot of people have noted that if you teach children how to breathe more intentionally, they will experience the same calming effect.
Awesome.
And it's not really deep breathing. In fact, that's one of the myths that I believed until I started researching and reading about it, was that somehow breathing deeper is better. But there's a kind of irony here breathing deeper does not necessarily get more oxygen to your tissues or to your brain. It's really breathing more slowly that causes the vasodilation, having a higher CO2 tolerance, actually expanding the blood vessels, the capillaries. That's what gets more oxygen to the tissues, not more breathing, but slower, more intentional breathing. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive, but when you think about it, it's when you're frightened or stressed or something, that's when you would breathe quickly. When you're relaxing or almost sleeping, that's when you would start to slow down. So another application of this is when you're trying to go to sleep at night.
Yeah, I've been doing it at night too. I notice if I slow my breath, I'll fall asleep a lot faster.
Yeah, and you can even do like 4 in and 8 out, or 6 breaths in and 12, not
6
breaths,
seconds. Yeah.
6 seconds in, 12 seconds out. It doesn't even have to be an exact second, just a count. And that also has so many of those benefits. And then the thing I really love about this is that when you are singing or chanting or humming, you naturally do this. You take a quick in-breath, and then you regulate for the purposes of producing sound more slowly when you're going out. This happens, of course, when we're having good conversations as well. So what that kind of means is that the more singing you do, the better oxygenation of your tissues you will have.
Yeah. So, hey, moms, when you're in the shower first thing in the morning, don't be afraid to sing a little.
The other thing is that humming has this effect.
Okay.
And so when you may be feeling a little agitated or stressed, it may not be, you want to break out into a hallelujah chorus, but you can do this subtle little humming that goes on. And this regulates the breath and promotes the production of nitric oxide, which are vasodilators, parasympathetic system, calming everything down. So, and those are 2 things you can do with young children.
Yeah.
I think children can learn to focus on their breathing as young as 3 or 4 years old, certainly by 6 or 7. And saying calm down by taking several deep breaths isn't necessarily the best way to help them calm down.
Interesting. So what was next after breathing? I can't remember now.
Movement.
Yes.
Movement. And so this is something that I think most people instinctively know, but again, we kind of wake up slowly. And so we, sit in the dark, cup of coffee, biggest mistake, open up a screen and start looking at the, what's happening today, or getting distracted, or doom scrolling and being depressed about the condition of the world. It's
so yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. And I would fall under that trap. But literally before I sat in on your chat, I would wake up and I'd be like, oh, just playing on the screen, like scrolling for a minute helps me to wake up. And I'm not someone who generally scrolls on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I'm usually just on for my business side of things, and I hop off. But I would fall into scrolling through my emails or scrolling, doing that first thing, thinking it's helping me to slowly wake up. But then when I started implementing your tips of light and breath and movement, I realized I was waking up so much more quickly and in a much better mood.
Yeah. So there's a guy I follow a little bit. He's a British doctor of Indian descent. His name is Rangan Chatterjee.
Okay.
And he's written a couple of bestseller books. He's really a very pleasant person to listen to, because he has this very calming, kind of slight, Indian accent, but British. It's like the perfect combination of musical accents. And he talks about, in the morning, prioritizing mindfulness, movement, and mindset.
Yes.
And I heard his podcast on this. I thought, I'm going to try this. And part of the mindfulness, you just accomplish that by doing some breath work. And it sets your mind in a calm position to begin the work of the day. And you see the value when you juxtapose that against the habit of, starting to look through email and see what's there. So, and his point, really important, is you don't have to have a lot of time. You don't have to do this for a long time. He says even a few minutes of mindfulness and movement and mindset will make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I've got maybe 5 minutes on a good day, 10 minutes in the morning. That's all I've got before someone's in my room bothering me.
Yeah. So, 2 minutes of attending to your breath, maybe, outside in the sun. Another thing I mentioned, I don't know if I fit it into the talk you heard or not, but I read a whole book on grounding and the importance of being outside barefoot, connecting with the natural electromagnetic currents that are in the earth.
Yep.
That sounds a little bit woo to some people, but it's scientific. And we all walk around in rubber shoes on insulated surfaces all the time. So if you're going to go outside, try to, stand on the grass if you have some, or sit in a chair with your feet, even on concrete is better, but bare feet on the ground, breathing. And that does a lot toward, getting you in that connected mindfulness. Then movement, he says it doesn't have to be a big, long, 20-minute exercise program. Just a little bit, whatever that is for you, whether it's stretching or doing some kind of, mild aerobic activity or whatnot. In my case, I did this 2 years ago and then I didn't do it for a year and I started it again, is I'm adding 1 push-up a day to my of push-ups, not nonstop. I can't do 200 push-ups nonstop, but I built myself up to sets of 30 or 40. So usually the first thing I do within, I don't know, the first 10, 15 minutes of being awake, I'll drink some water with some salt, get some electrolytes in my body, replenish. And then I'll do a set of push-ups, a set of leg lifts, and a set of alternating leg squats. It takes 3 or 4 minutes. And that gets me my first set because I do have this goal to keep adding 1 a day, and I'm already up into 200 and some days. So if I don't start early, it's hard to get them all in before I don't want to. And then I went for a year and I did a little rowing machine bit, just 10 minutes of rowing. And I found that, yes, it has these positive effects on both emotional condition as well as just overall kind of, I don't know, I can't measure brain function objectively, but I just feel ready to face the day.
Absolutely.
That.
Yeah,
And
mine's a few squats out on the balcony, maybe some like calf raises, and then some push-ups, and maybe like a light, quick little 1-minute yoga flow, something to just stretch and get moving. And it, like you said, it's just a couple minutes, but it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And, if your kids are around, they can do stuff with you too. My grandchildren who live not far from here will sometimes spend a night or 2 nights, sometimes even 3 nights they'll spend at our place. And they usually wake up pretty early. So they may or may not wake up as early as I do. But if I come out and they're there, they know first thing I'm going to do is hit the floor and do some push-up. Well, they just come over and do their little push-ups with me. And then, I'm doing leg lifts and showing them how to do that the right way. And kids love doing stuff like that, especially with, a parent or grandparent. So I think it's a contagious idea. And and then the third thing he says is mindset. And he uses the idea of a short kind of affirmations. And that's not something I've ever personally really got into. But I would be someone who would be more likely to read some scriptures or listen to maybe a podcast or part of a podcast that's really more philosophical or spiritual in its orientation. And just to say, yeah, I could dive into the stuff of life, but let's kind of about the stuff of the soul first. And so just the 3 M's, mindfulness, movement, and mindset, I think have made a big difference for me. And I'm so happy to hear that you picked that up and tried it.
Yeah, the mindset, like mine, I have a quick, like 1 or 2 line little prayer that I've been saying every morning, just that God will guard my heart with peace and rest, and fill it with joy, draw me closer to him, and I'm a big fan of affirmations as far as like birth work goes. I use them so much during birth, and even during pregnancy. I'm always telling moms like, hey, you've got to say these things, and you've got to say them regularly so you believe them.
Yes.
And that's where, you can choose, scripture reading, prayer, affirmations, but whatever it is, but it just has to be something positive, and it has to be something, I like the way you said it, that is like addressing the soul to really start that mindset. So that is super helpful to just start your day on a positive note. And then let's quickly go through there were 2 more, right? Food and
environmental factors.
Environmental. Yeah. So let's quickly go through those 2 though.
Yeah. So, one of the things that a lot of people will say or believe is about food is you are what you eat. But this is not quite true. The more true idea is you are what you absorb. You are made of the nutrients that get through your digestive system and feed your cells. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are not getting the nutrients they need, not because they're not consuming them, but they're not processing them. They're not absorbing them. And I follow a guy named Stephen Gundry. I don't necessarily like or agree with everything he says, but he does really make a strong case for the fact that the most important thing about your body is your gut health.
Yes.
Do you have a microbiome that is working to help you digest and absorb all of the nutrients from the food you're eating? That if that isn't in place, if that's not working well, you'd have the healthiest diet in the world, but you're not going to get the nutrients that you want. And I'm sure as a midwife, you are constantly trying to help moms figure out the best diet during pregnancies. And
well, doula, not midwife. I'm not up to midwife status yet.
Okay.
But doula, I am a midwife's assistant. So,
but a coach. I mean, you're a coach, and you're 3 steps further down the path of knowing the best ways to go. So, paying attention to gut health. And, a lot of people, unfortunately, have a disease and they have to take antibiotics, or get a serious infection. They have to take antibiotics. And those antibiotics will kill both the good and the bad bacteria. And I guess I didn't really realize until fairly recently how dependent we are on bacteria to digest our food. In fact, if we had no bacteria, we would die. We would not even be able to create the necessary end products out of the nutrients that we create. And it starts in the mouth, actually. And this is an interesting thing you probably have heard, but evidently children born by C-section lack the benefit of the microbiome enhancement that occurs when they're born vaginally.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's important to understand that and try to supplement with, some of the positive digestively enhancing bacteria. Another thing I didn't know, and I'm grateful because I never really lived in a culture with anybody who used mouthwash. I didn't grow up with it. My wife never used it. I never used it. Nobody ever complained. But evidently, antiseptic mouthwash will destroy the bacteria in your mouth that are essential for the digestion of your food properly.
Yep.
So all of that. So getting the probiotics both in the diet through fermented foods, like your sauerkrauts and your kombucha and things like that, as well as being aware of some times you may want to supplement with some probiotic bacterial strains.
Yeah, because if you think about it, all of the organs in our bodies require nutrients to function. They don't all require the same nutrients, but they all require nutrients to function. And if the food we put in our mouth, then it goes down to our gut. And if in our gut, it is not able to process those nutrients, then our organs are not getting the nutrients they need. So obviously they're not going to function as well.
Yeah. And I was just recently listening to a doctor on a podcast he was saying that in his estimation, half of the U.S. population very likely has small intestine bacterial overgrowth.
Mm-hmm.
So, that which is basically a overgrowth of the non-beneficial bacteria. And the way to counter that is to reduce your inflammation, increase your positive, bacteria. And, you can gradually change that, but it goes along with a lot of other health problems, type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, obesity, all sorts of kind of chronic problems that people are suffering. And their digestion is one of the first things to get hit. So, gut health. And then I think I talked about the importance of the right kind of oils in the diet.
I could sit and talk to you about like proper diet and foods probably all day, because there's so many little things that people need to know. Like, you're about to say with the oils, like we live in a culture that is full of like trans fats and omega-6, way too high amounts of omega-6s versus omega-3s, and omega-9s, I'm pretty sure is some oil out there.
Right.
And it's all, we consume so much more of the bad oils than the good oils.
Yeah, the omega-3, 6, 9, and 7s are all essential fatty acids. So we need them all. But what's important is the ratios. So if you go back like 150 years ago, people are eating, very unprocessed, mostly just, what you could kill or pick or grow. And that's what they were eating. And so they had a good balance, like 3-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3s, or even lower if they had a high fish diet. But now, because of these highly processed cooking oils, vegetable oils, seed oils, the average American has like a 30-to-1, or some people even up into the 50 or 60-to-1 omega-6, omega-3. And so that's where the imbalance comes. And what a lot of people don't know is that these so-called vegetable oils, like, Wesson and Crisco and the stuff they use at fast food restaurants, those oils are highly processed. To get those oils out of the, the corn or the canola or the soy or wherever they're getting it from, they have to use very toxic chemicals to force the extraction of the oil. And those things are so awful. They then have to use another wave of less toxic, different chemicals to get the toxic ones out. And they have to process. And it goes through these multiple cycles of being processed. And it strips from those oils all of the corresponding nutrients and micronutrients that allow the absorption of those oils. So yeah, you can go eat your corn or canola or your soy, you're going to get oil, but you're going to get the micronutrients that allow you to use the oil to absorb it. You strip all that away, your body can't deal with it. And what happens? Inflammation.
Yeah. Yeah. Not all fats are created equal. Like that's what I always tell people. Not all foods are created equal in general. Not all calories are the same, it's just, you have to kind of be really careful about that. This is very hard for me to say because I really would like to keep talking to you about food, but we need to jump on to the next one, which was environment.
Environmental disruptors. Mostly we're dealing with a very polluted modern world. Most listeners are familiar with words like, BPA, phthalates, parabens, glyphosate, atrazine, mercury, PFAS, and these are in our plastics and our cleaning solutions. A lot of self-care, just straight commercially produced soaps and lotions and makeups and things that go into packaged foods. And, even our water is just too contaminated, really not have a negative effect on us. So we can't really eliminate completely these environmental disruptors, many of which are endocrine disruptors. We know for a fact that the phthalates in the water and the environment mimic estrogen, which is why worldwide, and it's worse in more polluted places than others, we're seeing early onset of puberty in females, and we're seeing the late or the very low levels of testosterone and sperm count in males. And in nature, we're even seeing, in rivers and things, almost the elimination of fully male species because these endocrine disruptors mimicking the estrogen and unbalancing everybody and everything. So, how do we deal with it? Well, we try to do what we can with what we have available. I think everyone really needs to have a good water filter system. Tap water, as you know, is so contaminated, not just with things like psychedelic drugs, but with all of the hormone side effects of birth control that women all over the world are using in large quantity.
Well, even things they purposely put in the water, like chlorine and fluoride, and I mean, so many things.
So, spending money on a good quality water filtration system, I would put as, a top priority for anyone. It's more important than what kind of car you drive, honestly. Kind of car you drive, you may or may not feel happy. You may or may not have to get it fixed more often. But once you get those pollutants in your body, it is really hard to get them out. So, that, and then you could also look at an air filter. I don't think we worry quite so much about that. And then
probably depends on the area you live in too.
Yeah,
if you live in a big city, you may be a little more concerned about air quality versus if you live, in the middle of the country or something.
Did you just move into a house with new carpet and new paint? There's all that to take.
That's
take
true.
care of. But I think we have huge advantages living in this modern world where there's all this exciting research and nutritional options, and we know so much more than even our parents did. Even 30, 40 years ago, we know so much more, but we also have environmental factors that we have to be a lot more careful about than we did in the past. So that's kind of the thumbnail sketch of the things I've been getting so excited about learning and trying to improve. My particular goal is, I'm 63 right now, and I've got grandchildren. The oldest one is just turning 14.
Okay.
And what I really want more than anything is I want to be able to swim and wrestle and play chess with my grandchildren's children.
Yeah.
And to do that, I've got to extend my health span to approximate my lifespan, whatever God gives me, I'm happy with. But I want to be the best person that I can be for as long as I am alive to do that.
Yeah. And I think that especially all parents, but this podcast, we're specifically talking to moms, like that's our goal too. Like we want to be able to not just live our lives, but to live our lives well and to be the best versions we can be. And I think all of that, to just sum up everything you said, obviously like food and health is so, so important. And all of these things are just little ways we can help through sunlight early in the morning, mindfulness, movement, and mindset. Like those are the 4 things that I've really been focusing on since I heard your talk. It takes 5 minutes in the morning to do that. Adjusting for food, adjusting for environmental factors may be a little bit of a longer process. Still super important. But, just to remember how to start that day well. And for me, sunlight, mindfulness, movement, and mindset. And then food affects your body and environment affects your body. Affects, not infects. We're trying not to be infected. Also so important. I have to give you a huge thank you for being here. You are literally like my favorite speaker at the homeschool convention.
You're so kind. Thank you.
You're so interesting. I mean, it's just so easy to listen to you talk. Hopefully they feel the same way on the podcast. Before we finish up, you have a podcast also, not related to birth, but maybe still very relevant for a lot of my listeners.
It's called the Arts of Language Podcast. And so people can search that or search my name, Andrew Pudewa, or go to our website, IEW.com/podcast and get information. And we address topics mostly pertaining to the teaching of the arts of language to children. But we have a very wide range of listeners, from kids themselves, teenagers. I was surprised and happy to hear teenagers who listen to me on the podcast, parents of all sorts, teachers, interested parties. And so we've got, over 500 episodes, I think, in the lineup. So, please check it out.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. Listeners, I'm going to put a bunch of links in the description below because he just mentioned so many helpful resources. I'm also going to stick his podcast in the link below. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at contact@thenaturalbirthsite.com. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.
Hi, Rachel Manns again. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to and rate this podcast and head over to thenaturalbirthsite.com to check out our online natural birth education course, birth story blog, YouTube channel, and more.